Rabbi said that today is Yissocher Frand. So for Parshas Pinchas it's also the beginning of the 3 weeks, we will speak about a couple aspects of the 3 weeks. The Shulchan Aruch Paskins in Aruch Chaim and Siman Tov Kuf Nun Aleph Sif Beis. Ein Neisim Noshim Miyem Reish Chodesh Ad La'achar Tes B'Av. Mechaber Shita is that you're not allowed to marry someone from Reish Chodesh Av until after Tisha B'Av. As you well know, the Mechaber Shita is that all the halachas that we refer to as the halachas of the 3 weeks, the Mechaber Shita is more kal than our Shita, the Ashkenazic Shita. And the Mechaber holds that the Yisur of marrying a woman or making chasanis is only from Reish Chodesh until after Tisha B'Av. The Ramah writes on this, "V'noigin lahachmer she'ein neisim noshim miyud zayin b'tamuz ad la'achar tes b'av." So, technically speaking, there's nothing wrong with a Sephardi for a Sephardi for getting married, because according to the sheet of the Mechaber, the whole Avelis, at least Menegea Nesuin, only begins from Reish Chodesh until after Tisha B'Av. It's the Ashkenazim who follow the sheet of the Ramah hold that the Avelis and the Halachas begin from Shivasa B'Tammuz. The Mechaber over here, notably, does not distinguish or delineate between a person who is Mekayim Piri V'Rivya and a person who wasn't Mekayim Piri V'Rivya. The Mechaber doesn't say that Ein Neisim Noshim Reish Chodesh Ad La'achar Tisha B'Av V'Amid Dvorim Amurim L'mi Shelo Kiyim Piri V'Rivya Aval L'Shemi Shekiyim Piri V'Mi Shelo Kiyim Piri V'Rivya is mutter. That means that the Mechaber Shita is that there's no chilek whether a person was already married and was Mekayim Puruvul, whether he's not married. The Yisur is absolute. You're not allowed to get married from Reish Chodesh until after Tisha B'Av, and according to the Ramah, you're not allowed to get married any time during the 3 weeks. So I saw an interesting ha'ara on this, but that the Yeshuas Yankiv over here in Siman Tov Kuf Nun Aleph, the Yeshuas Yankiv is Ma'ira. Because the Mechaber Paskin Siman Tov Kuf Ayin Hey Siv Zayin. There's a whole set. This is not Negea Bisman, as at least not in Chutz La'aretz, but the beginning of Masechta Tainis deals extensively with what's the halach, what do we do, what do they do in Eretz Yisrael if it doesn't rain? So there's a whole Seder Tainius, a whole Seder Hadvarim, how about fasting and what the procedure that to do rain. Like, Lahavdil, the southwestern part of the United States is undergoing now a drought. It's the worst drought in 30 years. And it hasn't, in the whole winter, they got like 2 inches of rain, if that much, and they haven't had rain in months. It's a drought. I mean, it's a gefer l'chamatziv. People aren't sensitive enough to this. But in Eretz Yisrael, if chas v'shalom such a thing would happen, so the Mishnah, the Gemara delineates the Seder of the Tanaisim. So, what do? First you fast, and first certain people fast, etc. The Gemara goes through a whole Seder Advarim. State in Mechaber and Siman Tov Kuf Ayin Hey that after you go through the whole series of Tanaisim and it still hasn't rained, Mamatin b'masu humaton. So it can become in the middle of the winter, it can become like a Tisha B'Av period. Mamaitan b'masu humaton, you don't do business, u'mabinin shal simcha, u'mamatin be'eretz v'nesuin. And you're not allowed to get married. It's mamish like a period of Avelis. Ella im loikiyim piri v'rivya. But over there, the Mechaber writes that even though it is a facsimile of the halachas of the 3 weeks of the 9 days, in terms of Mamayte B'Masamata and Bin Shal Simcha, it's the parallel halachas. But when it comes to getting married, if a person hasn't been Mekayim Piri V'Rivya, we let him get married. So, Frek the Yeshuas Yankiv, Ma'ishna. what's the difference between the halachas of Bein HaMetzarim, that it's an Avelis, and yet we permit a person to get, and we say it's also to get married in spite of the fact that he hasn't been Mekayim Pir V'Rivya, and in the period of Tanaisim, that we do permit for a person to get married if he hasn't been Mekayim Pir V'Rivya. Yes? Well, that's all. Well, it's not indefinite, because it comes a time, I think, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and then too late, and there's nothing you can do. So there is also a period, so maybe a little more extended. Well, if you make the cheshbon, I mean, it's not all that long, because you have to go through a whole bunch of weeks. You know, Beis Hey, Beis Hey, Beis, etc. So, I mean, I never figured out exactly where it would come out in the calendar, but we're not talking an indefinite period of time. So it's a month, it's 2 months, whatever it is. So, frankly, Yeshuas Yankiv, they're both similar. They're both halachas like Kibnei Adam Hamnizufim Lamakom. We are noig avelis because we know the Rebbe Shalom is angry with us. Yet over there we're matul l'shem piri v'rivya, and over here we're not matul l'shem piri v'rivya. What's the chiluk? So the Yeshuas Yankiv is a very interesting teretz. The Yeshuas Yankiv Hayad in saying that this whole halacha, that you're not allowed to get married in this period of time, Hayad in saying that a person who was not Mekayim Piri V'Rivya, for him we would say the halacha doesn't apply. In other words, min hadin, min asmara, the halacha, the prohibition against getting married in this time period does not apply to a person who hasn't been Mekayim Piri V'Rivya. And therefore, any male who hasn't been Mekayim Piri V'Rivya should be allowed to get married mamish Reish Chodesh Av if he wants. There's only one problem. And that is, in order to get married, you need a woman to marry you. The problem, Dr. Yeshuas Yankiv, is that she doesn't have a mitzvah of Piri V'Rivya. So maybe about she doesn't have a mitzvah Piri V'Rivya, so good. You have Mekayim Piri V'Rivya, that's your problem. Woman's on mitzvah in Piri V'Rivya. Woman's on mitzvah to have children. So, you can go ahead and say, listen, I gotta get married. I have to Mekayim Piri V'Rivya. But the woman, your kala can say, sorry, not my problem. Frek the Yeshuas Yankiv, the Nebazeh, how come Lagabi, the period of Geshamim, when there's a drought, there we say, the Malachim Piri V'Rivya are allowed to get married? Zakta beautiful. The Gemara says in Masechta Tainas Adav Zayin, that Mipnei Ma HaGeshamim Ne'atzarim. Why doesn't it rain when it's supposed to Mipnei Bittul Torah? There, the whole reason why the drought comes is because of Bittul Torah. Women aren't mitzvah in Talmud Torah. Women aren't mitzvah in Talmud Torah. So the halacha is that these halachas of fasting for not having rain, it doesn't apply to women. Menela, the pshat is you who's responsible for this partly anyway, because you haven't learned. So you should get married. But if you haven't been Mekayim Puru, okay, we let you get married. A dispensation, they weren't geyser on you. What about me? Me, Bichlal, the whole series of Tanaisim that we fast for not rain doesn't apply to women. Why? Because they're not mitzvah in Talmud Torah, and therefore the Atziras Geshamim, the lack of rain that comes about, is not because of the women, because they're not buried Bittul Torah. Therefore, Lagabi, that period of time, the Mechaber passes beautifully. For period for Rivyo, we let the person get married. The woman, even though she's not mitzvah Puruvub, but she's not mitzvah in the Tanaisim either. But Sreifas Beis Elokeinu, the Churban of the Beis Hamikdash, that's something that applied to men and women as well. So a woman has to be married all the halachas of the 3 weeks and the 9 days, just like a man. So, you have to get married because of period for Rivya? That's your obligation. That's not my obligation. obligation. So the Rabbanan did not give me a dispensation. Therefore, Paskins the Mechaber, you're not allowed to get married in this period, and the Mechaber does not distinguish between whether the man was Mekayim Peruv or not, because it's a moot point, because even though if he hasn't been Mekayim Peruv, that doesn't give any heter for the woman to do it. Azay Zok the Yishuas Yankiv, a very, very nice chap. The Mechaber then continues and says that it is, however, mutter aval le'oreis b'loi suda mutter va'afilu b'tes ba'ov mutter le'oreis shelo yikadmenu acher. The Mechaber paskins that a person is allowed to make erusin even on Tisha B'Av shelo yikadmenu acher. Meaning as follows: as you know, there is a chiluk between erusin and nisuin. Erusin and nisuin, in the Talmudic times at least, they used to separate the erusin and the nisuin. The erusin is when you give the woman the ring, you say Haret Mukadeshes Li. At that point in time, she's what's called an arusa. Until one brings her into one's own home, that's the nisuin. So today we do it all at once. And the Hachnasa L'Chuppah, that's why we get married under a chuppah. That's called the Hachnasa L'Chuppah. That's the nisuin. So the erusin and nisuin occur simultaneously. But in olden times, what they used to do is a man would go in front of two witnesses. He would be Mekadesh the woman. She would be an Eisha Shish Gemurah. She's an Arusa. Haret Mukadeshes Li. This wouldn't be in his Rishus. It wouldn't be in his chuppah or in his home. And she would remain an Arusa. The halacha is, Paschal to Mechaber, you are allowed to make erusin even on Tisha B'Av itself, just without a suda. Because erusin itself isn't a simcha, and therefore there's no suda, and you're allowed to do this. What's the rush? The Zakta Mechaber, Shalo Yikadmenu Acher. So this is a very distressing halacha. Shlo yikadmenu acher means lest someone else chaparai, which means, if you wait over here through the 9 days, who knows what's going to happen? Maybe some other guy is going to come in on this situation, and you're going to lose out. So the Chazal, the Meforshim explained, Shami Yikadmenu means Shami Yikadmenu Acher Barachamim, that a person will daven and he'll be zeicha to this woman. But this is a very distressing halacha, because we are all brought up, and rightly so, with the hashkafa that Arboim Yaim Kaidem Li'Yitziras Havlat, 40 days before conception, Bas Kol Yetzei, Machrezes Bas Pleini LePleini. Everybody believes in the Indian of Bashert. How do you reconcile that you're allowed to get married on Tisha B'Av, Shalo Yikadmenu Acher, with that which we know to be a fact, that every person's Bazug is preordained min Hashamayim? So what does it mean? Shami Yikadmenu Acher Barachamim. He's going to prevail upon the Rebbeinu Shalom to let him be the lucky guy. So I found that the Yushalmi asked this kasha. The Yushalmi in the first parak of Masechta Kiddushin, in Masechta Ksubis, Yushalmi parak Aleph Halacha Aleph, the Yushalmi asked this kasha. How did I find this Yushalmi? The only trouble is I can't find it now. How did I find this Yushalmi? So I found this Yushalmi in its Tzitz Eliezer. So it's not the same print as my Yushalmi. Here it is. I found this Yushalmi in the Tzitz Eliezer. The Tzitz Eliezer is in Chelek Yud Gimel Siman Samach. The Tzitz Eliezer was asked the Shaila, Aydais Liaris or Lisharech B'Tisha B'Av. Al das im Mutter la'asei shiduchen b'tisha b'av. Ni Rambam beperk Yud Milchus Yishus, basic b'pshitas, the Mutter la'asei afilo b'tisha b'av. V'chach yi halacha psuka b'turva achayim simen tov kuf nafsi v'peis. Shama yikadmenu acher. So he asks, Da'af al pisha halacha b'zihi kolkach pshuta psuka mikomakon lo shamanu oid shiyina lukein be'ez amakul amaisa lasi shiduchim b'tisha b'av. This is the halacha in Gemara. It's a halacha in Rambam. It's a halacha in Shulchan Aruch. Tell me, have you ever gone to an Eresin on Tisha B'av? Have you ever gone to a chassan party on Tisha B'av? Have you ever gone when they announced the Shidduch on Tisha B'av? Zulay Shamanu. He says, why? Was epis aren't we knowing this bisman hazeh? That's what he's addressing this in here. So in the course of a discussion, he brings a Yerushalmi. Yerushalmi says as follows. Shmuel Omar, afilu b'tisha b'av hi'aris, shelo yikadmenu acher. This mocker that you're allowed to have to become Harrison on Tisha B'av is Yerushalmi. It's a member in the name of Shmuel. The reason given is Shama Yikadmenu Acher. Shelo Yikadmenu Acher. Frek the Yerushalmi Akasha. Vichlafa Shitasa de Shmuel. It's a stira in Shmuel. Taman hu Amar Elokim Moshe Vichinim Beisa. So the Yerushalmi asks the Kasha. Shmuel is the one that says. The Yerushalmi brings psukim to this effect. Shmuel is the one that says that the Rebbeinu Shalom is the one that makes shiduchim. Bas pleni lepleni. So how can Shmuel, of all people, say you can get married even on Tisha B'av Shami Kamenu Acher when it is Shmuel himself who's the Baal Memra that holds that shiduchim are bashert. To explain, to read you from the Pnei Moshe, the Korban and the Pnei Moshe basically learn the same thing. Shmuel is the one that says that the shidduch's min hashamayim. Etc. And here he says, "V'hacha omer hachin shami kadmenu acher." So the Yerushalmi answers. Yerushalmi says, "Elo shelo yikad." So what does it mean? Shelo yikadmenu acher. Shelo yikadmenu acher betfila va'afal pikein loy kaima. Now, what do those words mean? The Gemara says, you know what Shmuel means? Shemi yikadmenu acher. Shemi yikadmenu acher betfila. And then the Yerushalmi says the enigmatic words, Va'afal pikein leikaima. So the Pnei Moshe and the Korban Eda both learn, Elosh leikadmenu acher hainu betfila she'afal pi shezivugu min hashamayim efsher shetoel tfilasei shalzeh lekainsa. Which means that even though shiduchim are min hashamayim, but maybe this person's tefillas to the Rebbeinu Shalom will be payal, will be effective to change the hashgacha. And then the Yerushalmi says, "Afal pikein lo yikaima, b'kol makom lo yiskayim hazivuk hazeh, b'achar kach yamu zeh, o yigarshenu v'tinasei leben zuga l'kayim hagzer min hashamayim." Peladika Yerushalmi, at least the way the Korban Eda and the Pnei Moshe learn it. You know what the Gemara means? Shami kadmenu acher. You're supposed to marry this girl. Azay, that's what the Baskol said 40 days before you were conceived. This guy's going to come along, he's going to bet Rachamim by the Rebbeinu Shalom, he's going to be successful, and he's going to change the Gzeira. And he's going to wind up marrying her. Except, Zokti Yerushalmi, that marriage is not going to last. That marriage is not going to last. Either he's going to die, or they're going to get divorced, so that the original Gzeira, Min HaShamayim, is going to have an effect. That's how the Pnei Moshe learns, and he says, the Kachkas of Haranzal, Perik Elu Megalchin, Ad Hoda Ka'amar Shom Shemi Yikadmenu Acha Barakamin. Azay Zok, the Yerushalmi. I assume, I guess, that this is somewhat of a consoling Yerushalmi, but a person at least the way they learn, a person has the assurance that maybe somebody will butt in on your shidduch, but eventually you'll wind up marrying the girl you're supposed to marry. So the Tzitz Eliezer brings a Meiri that says a different pshat in this Yerushalmi, which is B'negeya, the Parsim Shiduchim, a little somewhat disconcerting, but at least B'negeya, the Tzitz Eliezer's issue, at least he finds an answer to his question. Remember, his question is, how come nobody ever gets married on Tisha B'Av, or nobody is Ma'ares on Tisha B'Av? So he brings the Yerushalmi. Avoreize Matzasi Metzia Matzasi V'meiri V'beis HaBchir Al Yevamis Daf Mem Gimel Shemavar Shehasiyuma De Piska Hanal Shebiyushalmi, that these final words of the Yerushalmi of Af Al Pike Leikaima Yesh La Kesher Mashakadam Sha'akavana Lashmin and Sha'afal Pisha Tirtzu Lahami Diri Shmuel Shalo Yudvar Seisin says that even though the Yerushalmi was successful in answering the apparent steer in Shmuel who says that you can get married on Tisha B'Av Shemi Yikadmenu Acher, and Shmuel that says that everything is Pasheret because Shemi Yikadmenu Acher Barachamim, that a person can interfere with the Hashgacha via Tefillah. Afilu hachi etzem halacha shemashmein shemuter liaris petishbav loikaima hahalacha kavosei. Vizel lashon amiri. When the Yerushalmi ends va'af al pikein loikaima, the Meiri says that it means that Shmuel's din isn't lahalacha. Af al pikein loikaima, good. You've answered Shmuel, but Shmuel's din taki is not correct. You're not allowed to get married on Tisha B'Av. Va'afilu kein loikaimer lanta miri kloimer ein halacha kein. Ein halacha kein. So the Meiri doesn't learn afapi loikaima is referring to the shidduch, that the guy who interfered with your shidduch, it won't last. That's not how the Meiri learns. Doesn't mean that. Yerushalmi is not commenting on that. Yerushalmi is merely saying that the din doesn't remain. Shmuel's din doesn't remain. So the Tzitz Eliezer suggests that's why people aren't known to get married to have Eresin on Tisha B'Av, because according to this interpretation of the Yerushalmi, the din doesn't remain. That really doesn't help us, because after all, the kasha is Azay State in Shulchan Aruch, Azay State in Rambam. So good, you can find a Meiri, you can find a Rishon, always that says some kind of obscure pshat, but that's not the way we paskin. So the question then remains: why don't people get married on Tisha B'Av? So he wants to say, he says as follows: that Tzitz Eliezer offers his own pshat in the Yerushalmi. You know what it means, Afal Pikein Leikaima? It means nobody in his right mind is going to get married or Eresin on Tisha B'Av, because that is such a bad zman to make a shidduch that no one's going to do it. Which means the Gemara says, for instance, he brings the Gemara that it's mutter lasis malacha on Tisha B'Av. Technically speaking, you're allowed to do work on Tisha B'Av, but the Gemara says in Tainis, kol ha'isa malacha b'Tisha B'Av ein araya siman bracha la'olam. A person who's Eisa Malacha on Tisha B'Av is ein araya siman bracha la'olam. You want to go to work on Tisha B'Av? Is it mutter? Yes, it's mutter. Is there an Issa Malacha on Tisha B'Av? No. But, try doing a business deal on Tisha B'Av and see what's going to happen with it. In a Raisim and Brach Loilam, you won't have any brach, you won't have any nachas from that thing. So okay, that's the pshat. Afal Pikein Like Kaima, that's what the Yishami means. Is it mutter to get married on Tisha B'Av? Yes. Shami Kad Menu Acher? Yes. Afal Pikein Like Kaima, don't be out of your mind. Don't make a shidduch on Tisha B'Av, because it's not Mesugel for Atzlacha. I know someone, shall remain nameless. The city should remain nameless. But I know someone who was in real estate development. And he built the tallest building in the city. 76 stories. I mean, this was mamish. It's not the World Trade Center, but it's a Gesundheit building. So when you build a building, they have what's called a topping off ceremony. Topping off ceremony is when you get to the 76th floor. You build it floor by floor. You get to the 76th floor. So then there's a topping off ceremony. So he had the media and the press, and it was the biggest building in the city. When was the topping off? This guy's a Yid, but an ignorant Jew. So when was the topping off ceremony? Tisha B'Av. So Zeichrani that I said then that it's not going to have Atzlacha. You go ahead, you make off the topping off ceremony, the grand thing on Tisha B'Av, it's not going to have Atzlacha. The Kach Hava, the guy had a cash flow problem, and he couldn't keep up payments, and the bank repossessed the building, and that the crown jewel of his real estate empire was taken away from him. Why? So Memela does this is what the Yishami means. When the Yishami says Afal Pikein Like Kaima, that's what the Yisham means to say. It's technically that's all right to get married. Shami Kad Menu Acher. But don't try it, because it's not going to have Hatzlach. Tell you over another Maisa. Every time somebody becomes a chassan or you're getting married, you say, "So zayin na gute shah b'shtei b'shah toiva mutzlachas." So I'm also given a chassan, and Rob was being Masada Kedusha. So comes time to put the ring on. Guy's about to put the ring on. Of course, the chassan is nervous. About to put the ring on. Right about when he's about to put the ring on, say Hareya, he drops the ring. Okay, happened. Rav picks up the ring, gives it to the guy again. About to put the ring on. Boom, drops the ring again. Rav picks up the ring, gives it to the guy. Third time, drops the ring again. By this time, there's a murmur throughout the whole crowd, like, what does it mean? Like, what does it mean? Min Hashamayim, they're not letting the guy get married. What could it mean? So I don't know who the Rav was, but he was very smart on his feet. And he says, he interrupts and he says, we always wish that a chasana should be b'shah toivu mutzlachas. It wasn't the right moment. It needed another 45 seconds. So therefore, you have to go through that period, and then he put the ring on, and they lived happily ever after. What's that? Okay, I see we're running a little late, so I'm just going to say one other ha'ara on Shivas B'Tammuz, and then on the Rayu 3 weeks, and then we'll go to the Chumash part. In Siman Tov Kuf Nun Aleph Sif Tes, Mechaber Paskins Noi Hagin Shaloi Lecho Basar V'Shlo Lisleis Yayin V'Shabbazu. V'yesh Mesifin Meish Chodesh Al Hatainis. Excuse me. Dr. Ramah, the halacha is the Mechaber Paskins that we don't eat meat and drink wine during the 9 days. So the Mechaber Shita is the Shua Shechalba. This is again a kula that the Mechaber has, the Sfardim and like this. The whole 9 days business. It's not the 9 days. I don't know what they call it. Sometimes it's the 3 days. Sometimes it's the 4 days. It's only Shua Shechalba. Like for instance, this year, Tisha B'Av is on a Thursday, 3 weeks from today. So Tisha B'Av is on a Thursday. So their whole 9 days will only start on Sunday, the Sunday of the week of Tisha B'Av. Shua Shechalba. V'yesh Meisif and Reish Chodesh Al Hatainis. There are some people that do, but that's not the Mechaber Shita. We, the Ashkenazim, that's our Shita. The whole 9 days. So the Ramah writes, V'siyim Mesechta V'sudas Eris and Eichel and Basar V'shois and Yayin Kol HaShayoch and L'suda V'yesh L'tzamtzeh. The Ramah brings down the well-known halacha that for a Suda Siyim Mesechta, which is a Suda Siyim, it's a Sudas mitzvah, so we're makel and we let people we eat meat. And for this is Gevar the minig, that many people have the minig that they make siyumim during the 9 days so that they can eat meat. So there's a very famous El Yerabba. El Yerabba in Siman Tov Kuf Nun Aleph Sif Kot and Chav Ov. Sagt El Yerabba, the imlo yizdamein bilimudai hasiyam lo yamaher o ya'acher mishum kach. The El Yerabba writes that a person should not speed up his learning or delay his learning so as to make the siyam of the Masechta coincide with the 9 days. Well, mostly you're learning a Masechta. So here it is, Shavasa B'Tammuz. You have approximately 10, 11 days left. You have 25 blot left to the Masechta. So normally this would take you at least 25 days. So you put on the afterburners and you speed it up, and lo and behold, you finish the siyam. Or, more commonly, you're holding in a Masechta, you have 2 blot to go, which should take you 2 days. So instead of learning a blot a day, you learn 3 lines a day, and you get to where you got to get, and you're Sokta El Yerabba, you shouldn't do that. You should be Lo Yamaher O Ya'acher Mishum Kach. So I shall brought on a kasha, very interesting kasha, that L'cher Zetman Lehedya Fakert, that there's no problem with holding off on a Sudas mitzvah to delay it for when it is a propitious moment to do it. Where do you see this? You see this from the Gemara in Moed Katan. The Gemara has a discussion in Moed Katan on Daf Chesam and Beis Tesam and Aleph, the famous Gemara about how do you know Ein Ma'arvin Simcha B'Simcha. So the Gemara says, the Ein Ma'arvin Simcha B'Simcha Minolon D'chsiv Hayah Shlomo Beis Ahiyas Achog V'chol Yisrael Imoy K'chol Gadol V'lech Hamos Ad Nachal Mitzrayim B'fnei Hashem Akin Shivas Yom V'Shivas Yom Ma'abas Hayoyim. When Shlomo finished the Beis Hamikdash, so he made a sudas, a whole siyum, a whole suda. It wasn't more, it was only a suda that lasted for 7 days. It was the Chanukas Habayis. This rabbi side was the makar, in fact, that Ois and Suda L'Gomer Shal Torah. That when we finish a Masechta, a Limud, Ois and Suda L'Gomer Shal Torah. Just like you see when Shlomo HaMelech finished the Beis HaMikdash, he made a whole party. So Oisin Suda L'Gomer Shal Torah. So the Gemara says that Shlomo HaMelech made 7 days before Sukkot, and then 7 days of Sukkot, which means people were having simchas for 14 days. Our boss are Yom. Prektum Marakasha, Memisin the Marvin Simcha Besimcha, Yipoy Leminta Adachag, Avid Shiva Lahacha V'Shima Lahacha. So the Gemara says, why did Shlomo have to do that? Make 7 days and 7 days. He should have, pardon the expression, he should have killed 2 birds with 1 stone. He should have made the Chanukas Habayis of the Beis HaMikdash to coincide with the 7 days of Sukkot. Elamai, after Gemara, you see, Ein Marvin Simcha B'Simcha. Correct the Gemara. So the Gemara, maybe the nice, you're allowed to be Ma'ariv Simcha B'Simcha. The problem with Shlomo was that that's when it came out. He finished the Beis HaMikdash 7 days before Sukkot. So what was he supposed to do? He had to make it then, because that's when it came out. But Einochinami, if they would coincide, there's no problem with being Ma'ariv Simcha B'Simcha. So, fact the Gemara Kasha, what's the problem? You're telling me that it didn't work out calendar-wise right. He finished the Beis HaMikdash too early. He should have left off some part of the Beis HaMikdash unfinished and finish that Erev Sukkot and then say, now we finished the Beis HaMikdash, let's have a siyum, let's have a Suda siyum, and it would come out to coincide with the 7 days of Sukkot. So the Gemara, Shiyurei Binyan Beis HaMikdash, Lei Mishavinan. So the Gemara, you don't put off finishing the Beis HaMikdash. And the Gemara asks another kasha, Yiboy Lisher Ba'amal Kal Yekere. That's the Gemara. But what do you see from this Gemara? The Gemara asks the kasha, Shlomo HaMelech should have held off from finishing part of the Beis HaMikdash so as to make it that he could finish it. He could coincide the Suda Siyum with the 7 days of Sukkot. And what's the Gemara's teretz? The Gemara's teretz is Shiyuri Beis HaMikdash Lo Misharina. You don't do that to Beis HaMikdash. You don't, time when the Beis HaMikdash is finished, the Beis HaMikdash is finished. But lulei that, state in this Gemara, one is allowed to delay the finishing of something in order to let it coincide at a given date. State in this Gemara, Fakir for the El Yerabba. Azay, fact the Sefer, I forgot the name of the Sefer, but Azay fact there. So he wants to be Mechalek and say that there's a difference between changing your Seder Halimud or leaving something over. Einochinami, you're allowed to leave something over. What the El Yerabba was talking about is to learn quicker or to learn slower. That you're not allowed to do. But first of all, I don't understand the chiluk. And second of all, it's not mashma like that, because the El Yerabba writes, "Lo yimizdam b'limudu hasim, lo yemaher o ya'acher mishum kach." I mean, what do you mean lo ya'acher mishum kach? That means it's a very shvach chiluk. You can't learn quicker, but if you've learned it, you can leave over a little. It's klor mashma from this Gemara, you're allowed to leave over. And the El Yerabba says you're not allowed to leave over. Is doch shver of the El Yerabba. So, the pshat is as a Poshit. The El Yerabba is not suggesting that if I finish the Masechta and I let it sit for 2 weeks, and then I make a siyum, the your rabbi is not suggesting that that's not a Sudas mitzvah. Avad it's a Sudas mitzvah. And if I make the Sudas mitzvah, and if I do it then, it has all the dinim of a Sudas mitzvah. And if I in fact delayed and I made the siyum during the 9 days, it has the din of Sudas mitzvah, and I'm allowed to eat meat. What the El Yerabbe is merely saying is that it's not right to delay a siyum to circumvent the din. Meaning as follows: does the Gemara in Moed Katan suggest that Shlomo HaMelech should have delayed the binyan of the Beis Hamikdash in order so it should coincide with Sukkot? Yes. But you know why? Shlomo had compelling reasons to do that. Taisus in Moed Katan says, you know what? Well, you know what the reason was? Bittul Malacha. You know, in Amal Kiyar, people used to keep Yontif the way you're supposed to keep Yontif. Sukkot is 7 days, you took off for 7 days. Imagine having Klal Yisrael, having the whole country not take off for 7 days, but having the whole country take off for 14 days. You know, people have to work. It's the harvest season. It's September, October. People are busy. They have to make a living. So when the Gemara over there suggests that Shlomo HaMelech should have delayed making the siyum, making the suda, that's because there's a legitimate reason to do it. Bittul Malacha, Taisus says. Or the Marsha says. You know, the Gemara points out, you know what 7 days before Sukkot is? 7 days before Sukkot is in the middle of Yom Kippur. The Gemara says over here in Moed Katan that year, Klal Yisrael did not fast on Yom Kippur. Imagine that. The whole Klal Yisrael didn't fast on Yom Kippur because they were celebrating the binyan of the Siyum of the Beis Hamikdash. Teretz is because that was Xeris HaKosav Hayroah that they had the right. But like the Gemara has legitimate kasha. Hey, listen, let's try to arrange it, coincide it. We don't have to be Mavatal Yom Kippur. So the Gemara has legitimate reason. That's the Gemara's kasha. For the sake of Bittul Malacha, or for the sake of not trying to be Mavatal Yom Kippur, there's a legitimate reason to go ahead and to delay the siyum. But the El Yerabbe is saying, well, you finish the Masechta, you want to delay a siyum so you can have a piece of meat. You're circumventing the laws of the Chacham. That's not a right thing to do. Now, what's the din if you did? If you did, you did. The El Yerabbe isn't saying it doesn't have a din of a siyum, doesn't have a Sudas mitzvah. You see from the Gemara, it does have a din of a Sudas mitzvah. The Teretz is, El Yerabbe is saying there was no reason not to do it. And that's how the Aruch HaShulchan Bemiston says. The Aruch HaShulchan says the same thing. The Aruch HaShulchan writes, not a nice thing to do. Those people that Badafka finish up a Masechta so that they can make a siyum. Zok the Aruch HaShulchan classic. The Efshir Shekadai Lasis Kain Sha'idei Ze Yasik B'Teira. Zok the Aruch HaShulchan, because you want to have steak, and therefore you're going to go ahead and learn a little more. It's kedai for you to learn a little more. If the steak will get you to learn, okay, so then gzunta hate to it. Be alert. If that's the price, if that's the incentive you need to learn. Azay Zoktar HaShulchan. At any rate, Azay bleibt the din HaBaisai that one should not lechatchila leave over a Masechta. It's not right to circumvent the din, but nevertheless, such a siyum does in fact have a din of a bona fide Sudas mitzvah. The pasuk says in this week's parsha, Parshas Pinchas, L'chein emar hineni neisein lai risi shalom. That after Pinchas acted took Kanos and killed Zimri and Cosby. So the Rebbeinu Shalom says, Hineni Neisin Lo Brisi Shalom. So there's an interesting netziv. The netziv tells us what exactly is the Brisi Shalom. Why is that the appropriate response to Pinchas's activities? Which means that a person who goes ahead and kills two people in public, we don't look at such a person as the peacemaker. And therefore, Hineni Neisin Le Brisi Shalom Zoch Frek the Netziv is l'chayra somewhat incongruous, not the right award for the activity. So the Netziv says that the Brisi Shalom that the Torah is referring to over here is that B'noig Sheba'olam, that which a person does has a profound effect on what he becomes. The Welt says you are what you eat. But more appropriately, perhaps, is you are what you do. Like the chinuch in the mitzvah of famous chinuch in the mitzvah Shvir Setzim HaPesach, the chinuch says that if a person if a person naturally is a very kind and compassionate person, when he has to be involved in killing and hurting people, eventually this person is going to become a cruel and uncompassionate or not compassionate person, because by virtue of the fact of what he did. So Memela, what the pasuk is telling over here, Pinchas, is Hineni Neisin Le Brisi Shalom. That in spite of the fact that what you did over here was to take two people's lives, but it's not going to have the effect on you. And you're going to remain a peace-loving and kind and compassionate person, because you did this l'shem shamayim. The Meforshim point out that by the mitzvah from Ir Hanidachas, the halach is a whole city that worships Avodah Zarah, given the right conditions, the whole city has to be wiped out, men, women, and children. So there the pasuk says, after the Torah gives the mitzvah, the pasuk says, V'nasan l'cha rachamim. So the Meforshim point out that the Rebbeinu Shalom is assuring the people that after you mow down an entire city, so it could have an effect on a human being. So the Torah gives us a bracha, that it's not going to have that effect. I'm somewhat loath to quote her, and in fact, when I have quoted her in the past, somebody has even written me a letter in protest saying I had no business quoting her. But that said, I think it brings out the point. Golda Meir once said that she can forgive the Arabs for what they've done to the Jews. They'll say that they killed so many Jews, but she can't forgive the Arabs for what they did to the Jews in terms of what the Jews became, which means Jews have to become soldiers and killers, and it had an effect on the national psyche, or the national midas of compassion. So the teretz is that if one does a mitzvah l'shem shamayim, like Pinchas did, and he kills l'shem shamayim, then the Rebbeinu Shalom promises Hineni Neisin Le Brisi Shalom. If a person doesn't kill l'shem shamayim, he kills because out of hatred, or because it's gets a rush of adrenaline when you machine someone down, then enochinami, it can have a negative effect. But the Hineni Neisin Le Brisi Shalom, writes the Netziv, is an assurance that this won't have an effect on you. I saw in the name of Rabbi Kotler Zecher Tzadik Livrocha. Stern writes that the Welt thinks that Shalom is hugging and making up and kissing. And when you kill someone, that's the antithesis of Shalom. What the pasuk is made over here by Pinchas is that what Pinchas did was indeed an act of Shalom. Because what he accomplished over here was not war, was not Shalom, but it was Shalom. The pasuk says, right? Pinchas was matal Shalom between the Rebbeinu Shalom and Klal Yisrael. So what Pinchas did was an act of Shalom. It brought back peace between Klal Yisrael and the Rebbeinu Shalom. Sometimes you think an act is an act of not Shalom, when in truth it is an act of Shalom. Rabbi tells too that when the Roye Avraham were having a machlekes with the Roye Light, when they couldn't get along, so Avram says, "Al nasihi meriva beini ubeinecha." So we shouldn't have a fight. As they state in pasuk, "Al nasihi meriva." He pared no me'alai. Let's not have a fight. He pared no me'alai. Let's separate. Let's split. So you, let's make up and be friends. So how do you make up and be friends? Let's live in peace. Sometimes you can't live in peace. Avraham Avinu perceived that there was not going to be shalom. They couldn't. The Rayim couldn't remain together. So what's the Eitzah? He pared no me'alai. So that's the same thing over here. Over here, the shalom was killing the two people. That was matal shalom ben Klal Yisrael and the Rebbeinu Shalom. So that which is perceived as an act of not shalom sometimes is the greatest act of shalom. So the pasuk is made. Hineni naisin lebrisi shalom. He gets the shalom award, not the Nobel Peace Prize, but the Rebbeinu Shalom's Peace Prize. Ask the Nobel Committee in Oslo, Norway. A guy goes in and kills two people. He's the nominee for the Nobel Peace Prize for this year. That's not peace. That's violence. Can't get a Peace Prize for that. The teretz is no. The Nobel Peace Prize Committee versteht was is shalom. Amol shalom is to kill two people, that's shalom. To separate people, that's shalom. Shalom isn't always what the world thinks that shalom is. Well, one last Tahara. Sefer Bamidbar, as you all know, is called the Chumash HaPekudim. In English, Sefer Bamidbar is not called the desert, the book of the desert. It's called the book of Numbers. It's called the book of Numbers is because the Sefer basically begins with an accounting of Klal Yisrael, and the Sefer ends with an accounting of Klal Yisrael. We once spoke out of Netziv with the different types of countings. That's what's called Chumash HaPekudim. So this week's parsha, again, we have Parshas Pinchas. We have again a listing of the different shvatim. Chofetz Chaim pointed out the following ha'ara. Shevet Binyamin had 45,600 people. Shevet Dan had 64,400 people. So Shevet Dan had approximately 20,000 more people than Shevet Binyamin. Binyamin had 10 sons. And Dan had one son. Hushim ben Dan. Not only did he have one son, but he had a son who was deaf. Hushim ben Dan was deaf. So we were to go ahead and to make predictions. In a generation or two generations later, who would have more children? Who would have more descendants? The person who had 10 children or the person who had one child? Well, any statistician would tell you that the odds are that the person who has 10 children is going to have more descendants. He has 10 times the amount of, 10 times the opportunities to have children. And yet you see that Dan had 20,000 more people than Binyamin. So the Chafetz Chaim, you see from here that if the Rebbeinu Shalom wants to bless a person with children, even though al pi derech hateva, it's not likely that this person should have a lot of descendants. The Rebbeinu Shalom is a geyser or mekayim. On the other hand, if a person, the Rebbeinu Shalom feels that a person should be zeichet to harbe bonim, so he can have what on paper looks like the best type of situation, and his gate nicht. Shev Binyamin had 10 children, and he had less children. That's the way it is with everything in life. That's the way it is with parnasa. That's the way it is with shidduchim. That's the way it is with everything in life. You think, al pi derech hateva, how is this going to be? How is such a person going to make a living? How is such a person going to be matzliach? Harbe shluchim la'mokum. Shevet Dan and Shevet Binyamin are testimony that the Rebbeinu Shalom is a kol yochel, and the Rebbeinu Shalom has his cheshbenis, and that which we would think al pi derech hateva will happen doesn't necessarily happen because hakol biyad Hashem.
This year was presented by Rav Yissocher Frand Shlita. Lakewood. Kol Barama